Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! Here's Lipa, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal are in front.
Fascinating battle with West Ham that leads to 3 big points for Arsenal. Not on the agenda today, as has been preempted by the signing of Alex Runerson at goalkeeper. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, that's right. We wanted to talk about West Ham. Fascinating game, up and down. Maybe it was good, maybe it was bad. Midfield, is that an issue? Defense, what do we do with Kolasinac? So many talking points, and yet we have to set them all aside to do a full 240-minute podcast on the arrival. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to talk about them at all. In fact, we are going to pay even less attention to it than the Arsenal official account today has paid to it. I kid, because actually that would be impossible. He just got the tweet. Like, this dude signed. End of message. I love it. He did have a funny quote where he said that, the goalkeeper coach was a big factor in his signing. And I had to joke that us being the only club that wanted him also had to be a fairly big factor. But all kidding aside, we got a backup keeper. We got him cheaply. I'm fine with it. We're not going to go into the 2 refrigerators analogy today. What we are going to do is talk Arsenal. But before we do that, we haven't been doing advertising on the pod, and I do sometimes want to try to support businesses related to Arsenal and from Arsenal fans, so we're going to do that really quickly. ArsenalEditor.com. I want to tell you about it. So Niels was kind enough to get in touch and show us the website, and he's got some beautiful Arsenal posters there that I think are just really stunningly designed, and they look nice, and the pricing seems good. I wanted to support it on the podcast, and so we're doing that now. So you can go to arsenaleditor.com. There's Aubameyang ones, there's FA Cup ones, there's all the different players, variety of sizes, and framed or not framed, however you want to receive them, so make it easy for you if you want. Looks like free shipping pretty much anywhere around the world. And if you use the promo code ArsenalVPodcast, same as our Twitter handle, at ArsenalVPodcast, you'll get 10% off as well. So it's arsenaleditor.com. You can go there, support an Arsenal fan and his brand new business that he's got up and running, and we wish Nils all the best, along with my pronunciation of his name, which was probably wrong, but he's in Stockholm right now, cringing as I speak it. In any event, Paul's on Twitter at Pause in My Pants, and we will welcome him into the show now. Hello, Paul.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
And Tim's on Twitter at Stillberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Yeah, so this is going to be a difficult game to analyze because it is a win. I think we showed a lot of character in the win. I think some people are very unhappy with the way we played. And then I think there are other things about how we played that maybe reflect a different interpretation of the game. A game where there was a 22-minute period that we were outshot 10-0. Not great. But also a game where we had a lot of possession, a lot of dominance in possession, and there were some good things that we did and certainly created a couple of good goals to win the game. And I think it's just going to be one of these podcasts where your view on the game is going to be largely influenced by what section of the game sticks in your mind the most. But maybe the most important part of the game was before the game, and it's the fact that Tierney was not able to play. Hip injury, apparently not serious. Looks like he was just being held out precautionarily, you'd certainly hope, because he's had a bit of an injury track record. And Clive, this was a big call for Arteta, and I'd be willing to bet that having watched the game, if he could go back and pick someone else, he would. I can only assume he didn't feel Luiz was fit enough for the 90. I do think it is interesting that Cedric, who supposedly can play left and right, has now not made the matchday squad twice. Maybe he would have been someone to consider, or even Maitland-Niles, although playing him at left center back might have been a little uncomfortable for him defensively, especially going up against someone as big as Antonio on the West Ham side. But he did choose Kolasinac, and I do think that his involvement was a really big factor in some of the struggles we had, especially in light of how important Tierney has been. Saka coming in made sense to me. More attacking option for a home game against a team we needed to push back. But certainly partnering with Kola wouldn't have helped him at all. So how do you feel about that decision? Do you think maybe Arteta would have changed his mind, given a second go at it? And do you think it was really one of the big stories of how we played the match?
I think obviously Tierney does that role really well, and no one else can do it as good as him. But I don't think it was the biggest factor in the game as to why we didn't do so well. I think West Ham were quite smart. They matched us up with their system. And what they did really cleverly was they kept not only the width of the pitch covered by playing wing backs, but they also kept the depth much narrower for us. So front to back, they squeeze the lines really well. So if you think back to what Arsenal do well, is they have depth in their game and they travel up the pitch with zigzags and movement and switches. But it's all done from depth. And what West Ham did smartly was take the depth away. And that put pressure on our ball progression. What you have, if you're a footballer, you look ahead of you and you see crowds of people, what do? You don't punch it first time like we did against Fulham. It's all one touch, quick passing against Fulham. What you do when you got crowds of people ahead of you, if you had 2, 3, 4 touches. Yeah, and so that ball progression goes. And so players like Ceballos, players like Saka, players like Kolasinac, who were maybe just coming into the team for the first time, not quite as comfortable. There was no spaces for one-touch play, so we were moving the ball slowly. And so what we do as fans, we look at the players that have come in and say, well, they didn't do well, right? So, well, actually, what happened was West Ham did well, and they forced us to do other things as we were to build our game, right? So I think Kolasinac was an issue, but I also think Ceballos was an issue. I'll go into that a bit later. I also think what we did, on the right-hand side was an issue. I also think what West Ham did on the left-hand side was an issue for us, right? And so I don't want to do the whole soliloquy right now. Hopefully a bit left for me later on, but I can tell you exactly what happened in this game, where we went wrong. But I'm going to hold it for now.
Oh, I feel you will get your chances. I do love that you're baiting me by name-checking Ceballos as a disappointment, but not name-checking Xhaka, just teasing me, baiting me, hoping that I will take the fight. I will. But, before we do that, I think, look, Tim, the reason I thought that the Kolasinac thing was important is Saka is a more advanced player than Maitland-Niles, certainly on the ball. He wants the ball, and we saw that he was able to create basically both goals in a way with his involvement in those two moves. And if you just look at Tierney to Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and Maitland-Niles probably not as involved from an attacking standpoint as you'd expect Saka to be, but Tierney gave the ball to Maitland-Niles 12 times against Fulham. Kolasinac gave the ball to Saka 4 times. So that right there tells a story. I think the irony is Saka gave it to Kola just as much as Maitland-Niles gave it to Tierney, right? So it is the case that one of the big routes to getting the ball into that half space, getting that ball into the overlaps, which was Tierney to Maitland-Niles, was not available to Saka, who you'd expect to be even more dangerous from those positions. And on the limited chances he got, he was dangerous. But I guess if you're not going to point to that part of the pitch, I don't see any reason to not start with a midfield conversation, because I think it is a big part of it. Our central midfielders between them had 221 passes and created one shot. Now, the shot they created was Dani Ceballos' assist to Nketiah for the winner. Very important. And I know there are people that are going to be screaming, the central midfielder's role isn't to create shots. Well, Fulham pressed us, and that's how we created chances. We got past that press, but West Ham didn't. They sat back. And I think if you look at the positions that Xhaka and Ceballos took up, they were able to get more advanced at times. I mean, Ceballos extremely advanced for the goal that wins the game. But there were through balls on. There were times, and Kolasinac had them as well, where Lacazette was running between defenders, where Aubameyang was running between defenders, where Saka was coming into space. And too often I felt they took the easy road, the pass back to one another or to a defender or laterally. And so for me, Tim, to create chances and break down teams, the passes aren't going to play themselves. There has to be bravery. There has to be responsibility. The passes don't play themselves. Someone's got to get it between the lines, straight balls punched ahead to the forwards. And I think the midfielders not doing it in this game is a big reason why West Ham was able to keep us at bay. So do you see it similarly or maybe have a different take?
I still think there's that midfield piece missing, right? Because we're judging Xhaka and Ceballos as a 2 based on what we'd expect from a midfield 3.
That's fair.
And it was too late, I think, to do this in this game because of the circumstances. But the more I think about it, the more I think the Maitland-Niles Saka piece is key. And when it's Maitland and perhaps like a move I'd like to see is away from home, set up in that 3-4-3, have Maitland-Niles kind of going left wing back in field, and then replace him with Saka for home games like this, which is what he did. But I think we should outright change that. And I know like Arteta's not as hung up on formations, but I think we tweak that slightly and we don't make Saka a left wing back. We make him the left-sided central midfielder. That's where he made his 2 biggest contributions of the game as essentially a third midfielder. Because what what having a midfield two, as much as I kind of agree that Xhaka and Ceballos, I don't want to say they're limited, but because they do their jobs really well, it's just their skill sets are about getting the ball from the first third to the second third. We don't have anything in that area between, getting the ball from the second third to the third third. And we're kind of time sharing that third midfield slot. Sometimes it's the left wing back who comes in. Sometimes it's Lacazette who drops back into midfield. Sometimes it's Willian who comes in. And we've got like three players who kind of hover around in that area. And I think for games like this, we need a much more secure presence there. And then I think you'd see the more adventurous passing, because if Saka, for example, is not starting at left wing back and he's in that left-sided central midfield role, I think maybe, first of all, it's another passing option, right? It's another passing lane. But I also think that it just brings the lines of your team closer together, and that empowers the likes of Xhaka and Ceballos to try and play those passes, because you think, okay, I'm going to try that clip over the top. And we tried that a couple of times. I think we moved Xhaka over to the right, didn't we? And because we were trying to overload the left, we pushed Kolasinac up, we pushed Saka up, we pushed Aubameyang. But that's the thing, that's what I want to see, like from the start of these games, is to form that triangle on the left-hand side. Let's get Saka and, hopefully in the ordinary run of things, Tierney and Aubameyang nice and close together, exactly like we used to do Pires, Henry, Cole. That kind of triangle going on. I just felt that, by starting, I know Saka ended up in those positions quite a lot, but I think let's be bolder. Let's let's get him starting on like the halfway line and going forward from there, not starting inside his own half and then, having to do like a 40-yard sprint to get up there. Like, I think we move that piece forward a little bit for games like this. And we saw what happened. Saka, probably not a great game overall, but like you said, those two passes were match winning. But the other thing that happened was Ceballos, like you said, he sets up the winning goal because it's the first time he really breaks away from the midfield structure. Xhaka and Ceballos cannot do that. They cannot do that if there's only two of them. You can't. Xhaka's not going to do it anyway, because that's not his game. But Ceballos in particular, who probably has the athleticism to do that more often, he can't do it if there's a midfield two. He has to stay where he is. And I just think it makes us a little bit more static. And so I kind of agree with you, I guess, but I don't necessarily blame the players themselves. I just think that maybe we need to lose that little bit of inhibition at home, push Saka up into that left-sided midfield spot, and go from there really, and really give them more passing lanes, but also make them think, okay, well, if I try and clip that ball over the top to Aubameyang, most of the time the passes were overcooked. And I think the reason the passes were overcooked is because, there is no one else there except Aubameyang, so I can't short sell it. If Saka perhaps is 10-15 yards behind Aubameyang, you think, okay, I'll weight the ball so that even if the defender gets ahead on it, we've got the second line there and Saka can pick it up. As it was, Aubameyang was pretty much on his own. So you're basically just lumping hopeful balls to one guy in 20 yards of space. So I'd like to see an adjustment to the setup for these games.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think you can say if Tierney had played, then maybe there's more angles to get Saka the ball. There's more players playing hurtful balls. There were so many times when Kolasinac had runners that he just basically ignored, that Tierney would not have ignored. And, credit to Kolasinac, he just hasn't been playing much, and it's a very intricate system with where you have to be in and out of possession. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I don't want to beat up Kolasinac, because the fact is, no one thinks he's got a future at the club, and we just saw that on the day. I mean, Paul, the thing that's hard for me, the irony is I came away from this game feeling a lot better than it seems like most people did. And I think the reason for me is I am always looking to see signs of coherence to our football, signs that we are moving into space well and the players are giving the ball quickly. And I thought there were times we did that. And one of the indications of that for me was really just reading Scott's By the Numbers column for Arseblog. Look, I know that XG is like the gold standard for how you analyze the chances in a game, and we lost the XG battle in this game, and we were doubled up in shots 14-7, not great. But if you go sort of inside those numbers, Scott writes, in this match, Arsenal was able to actually get the ball into dangerous areas, and we're the better team when you look at the match from a non-shot XG perspective. And again, You can have your own opinion on any of these models and whether they're of value. But we had 3 non-shot XG to their 1.5, and really the number that I'm looking at is 63 touches within 25 yards of goal for us, compared to 34 touches within 25 yards of goal for West Ham. And it gets back to my point that the passes aren't going to play themselves. Paul, I thought the ball moved well, and we got into dangerous areas, and it was a failure to turn those dangerous positions into quality shot opportunities. And I think there's a lot of places you can look. I know that the primary responsibility doesn't belong with the central midfielders, but I think if you play 221 passes and create one shot, then maybe you haven't been adventurous enough. But do you see it as similarly a midfield issue, or maybe other things? I mean, we certainly will come on to players like Willian who may be more responsible for that sort of failure.
Yeah, so it was definitely a bit of a midfield issue, especially in the first half, and especially in the first 25, 30 minutes. It wasn't just the midfield. None of those bastards were hitting their passes. And Arteta talked about that. He also talked, to your point, about the quality in terms of finishing, because we created a lot of opportunities. And I think we made an adjustment at halftime. I think West Ham's positioning is very interesting in that they didn't have a low block. They had maybe kind of a mid block. If you think of the number of times we got the ball over the top, or if you think of the 2 goals, they're both from not a super high line, but given that West Ham were defending, a fairly high line in terms of how much space there still was to run to the goal line. So they chose to kind of set up very densely in that area where you're looking for your 8s or your 10 to be picking up that pass. Now, I think we did a piss poor job hitting Willian and Saka when they moved into those spots, but our difficulty getting fluency in the first half, combined with West Ham absolutely knowing where they needed to block us, but giving us the kind of that space beyond their back line, that was the gambit they took, on the basis that they'd then be able to counter from not too deep a position. They'd be able to go at us. So they kind of picked an interesting spot of the pitch to set up camp, make it really tough for us. And we struggled more than we should have, especially in the first half, because we just couldn't hit our bloody passes, because Willian and Saka drifting into midfield as occasional 8s and 10s isn't the same as knowing the 8 and 10 is going to be there, and the synchronicities weren't there. And it was Ceballos' first game back. I think I said on the reaction pod that I expected Ceballos to look a lot better in the rewatch. He didn't, actually. I thought he was doing some good stuff that maybe we hadn't all picked up on, but I think he kind of struggled in this game in particular. Not that it was bad, but
I agree that he struggled, but I certainly don't take issue with that conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, Saka kind of did something different in the second half. I think maybe the game loosened up a bit and there was a bit more space for him, but I think they also concluded, let's stop trying to play through their lines, let's play over their lines, because as we chatted about on the WhatsApp, I mean, I think he has 7 or 8 dinks over the top. They didn't all come off, but like you could put together a pretty nifty highlight reel of maybe 5 dinks over the top from Saka.
There's a video going around of his second half performance. I think it's a little misleading only because it doesn't show the passes he didn't play, the ones he didn't complete. It doesn't show the conservative choices. It's literally a supercut of his balls over the top. But to be fair, those balls over the top are good progressive attempts to drive us forward when we weren't able to play through the thirds. So he tried to skip a third, which, fair play.
And there was that clip of the international game the other day, with it against Germany for Switzerland, and he has that ball over the top. And this is like, if you like that, you're going to like this, because there's a bunch of them. Now, it doesn't mean he had a brilliant half and he had a brilliant game, but the one thing they did conclude was they could get Aubameyang, Saka, whoever, up that left-hand side in there after Fredericks, and Saka was quite a big piece of it. So I'm a bit torn. I think he actually mostly had a good second half, but that's because conditions changed a little bit and the approach changed a little bit. But we shouldn't rule out West Ham's role in that. But again, Arteta's interviews, as I said on the previous pod, he gives good interview. He's so crisp in the space 3-4 sentences. He lays it all out. We weren't at the races to begin with. We kind of got to grips with it at some stage. We had a problem with quality of finishing. Happy to get the results, that we practiced better. I think a real big piece of the choices we made on the lineup was the practice was so good during the week that when he lost Tierney, he went for like. The closest he had was Kolasinac, and, in hindsight, maybe you change a little bit how you want to play. And we came out and it was just a damp squib for 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, and look, timing is so important in football. What did we see during Project Restart? That was a huge feature of it. Arteta thrived in the drinks breaks, right? He would bring us out of the drinks breaks really well, I thought. He can coach up this team. We get unlucky that they score right before halftime, because if we go in 1-0 and he can coach them up a little, and West Ham has to come on to us, and we can tweak our plan a little bit to leverage having a 1-0 lead in the second half, I think it's a very different game, and a little unfortunate to have such shambolic defending on the brink of halftime, basically, because I think it could have been a very different second half without that. I mean, look, there is no question in my mind that some things the midfield did were good, and Saka, as you mentioned, had the ball over the top to Kolasinac, for example, in the penalty area, unmarked, that he just blasts in the stands under no pressure. And if they
couple to Saka, a few to Auba.
Well, and I mean, you look at it, I think there is an issue with the fact that, Willian had 7 touches within 25 yards of goal, 1 shot or shot creating action from that possession. And another one we're going to have to get to after we finish the midfield discussion is Lacazette, who had 11 touches within 25 yards of goal. And that produced 1 shot or shot creating action, which was his goal, to be fair. But the 10 other touches, a lot of slow plodding in the box. Willian set him up for a great early opportunity, did nothing. By comparison, you look at Aubameyang, who you say was kind of quiet. 9 touches within 25 yards of goal. 5 of them turned into shots or shot creating actions. Just a crisper player. He also had the beautiful assist. So, Clive, let's finish the midfield discussion, because I know there's meat on that bone and you want to get to it. To me, you can look at this game and say, this game is the absolute, put it in the Louvre, frame it, hang it somewhere, maybe hang it on arsenaleditor.com, wherever you want to put it, and hold it up as the example for why we are going after a player like Houssem Aouar, someone who can play the through ball, who can split defenses from the middle of the pitch, who won't look to spring it wide or go over the top every time. I think this is the quintessential game for what we were concerned about with Arteta's attack, which is, will we be able to create chances from the center of the pitch against defenses that are maybe a little more compact, and it was a problem on the day. So it doesn't sound like you want to put that burden on the midfield, but how do you want to evaluate that part of it?
Yeah, there's lots here, and Paul's really made some good points about where the space was. They played a highish line, they squeezed the space front to back, as I said earlier, and that created crowd scenes, and we kept trying to play through it or play around it, so it looked pretty sterile. So let's give credit to West Ham's shape. And the passes were over the top. If David Luiz playing, I tell you what, he'd had a field day in that left-hand channel, straight in there, first phase, they'd have been in trouble. They'd have soon dropped off, and then we would have actually had more room to play once they dropped off. So what we should have done early was go over the top much sooner, recognise the game that was there for us, stretch the game out, get some depth to the game. Once we got depth, then we can play our out from the back football that we saw at Fulham and that we all know and love, right? So that's one thing. The Xhaka and Tobias thing and the midfield thing. So what was happening was, because they were blocking off spaces, we were having too many touches. So the choreography of the team and the cohesion of the team had gone, right? So Tobias is keen to come in. He wants to have a touch, have a feel. And structurally, I know you're not going to like this, but structurally, he doesn't keep the same structure as El Nini does. He doesn't play on the slant. He goes and chases the ball. He goes after the ball. He wants to go over to you, wants to feel it. And what that does, it left Xhaka on a bit of an island sometimes. He was a pressing target. Back to the old days when he was on an island with no one near him, and suddenly Rice and them could go and get him, right? And Souček, they can go and get him, press him, win the ball, get into crossing areas. And it's interesting that we swapped them over, Tobias and Xhaka. And it's interesting that you guys think they want to overload the left-hand side. Well, actually, what was happening on our right-hand side was Cresswell and Masuaku were absolutely dominating, and they were putting in cross after cross after cross. They put in 28 crosses in this game. And to be honest, Antonio should have scored one when he sort of messed up in the 6-yard box. And I don't know, I asked the guys on Discord how many came from our right-back area, but a lot came from the right-back area.
I think it was 13 in the right and eight from the other side. So, I mean, a good solid amount more, yeah.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's an estimate based on looking at some maps of the pitch. I don't have the actual statistics, but it looks like 13 from the right and 9 from the left.
There you go. So I would have thought it was more than that. The ones that are more dangerous seem to come from left-hand side. You know, you have a memory in the game, so it may be slightly weighted.
Our defensive left, they're right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens was that we moved Saka over, and it's interesting. I thought we moved Saka over to help block off that side because he's our best defender. And the problem this team has is Xhaka's too important. And what does that say about the rest of the midfield? He moved over, in my opinion, to stop their strength, which was Cresswell and Masuaku, who were causing us a problem. And Antonio's position was also in the holding Bellerin channel. So that was where they went for. They went for our right-back area, and we went for their right-back area. And it was a game of left-hand sides. And so we flipped Xhaka over. And because of Ceballos' shall we say, lack of structure, he actually makes a run that no one else would make and ends up setting up the winning goal. Right, so
yeah, he's in the left half space as the most advanced player. It's a very weird position to pop up in.
And he
that's actually his favorite place to do triangles. I kind of said that a lot. We haven't seen it much because we've played him deeper, but when you let him wander, that's where he heads, right up into that corner. Right
into that left-hand side, into that left 8V, that's where he goes. So we ended up loading up that side. So what we had, you guys, and you all do it, and I'm going to say something, right? Because we've grown up, we're Arsenal fans, so we've grown up with creative players. So we think creativity is in someone's feet, right? But creativity is based on how you receive the ball and how you move. A creative player can't do it on his own unless you have creative movement. What we had at Fulham was lots of running and creative movement, which made our passing look fantastic. Not one of us mentioned creativity in that game because we had lots of distraction running, lots of overloading, lots of distances, and lots of speed and lots of movement. And my goodness, we all looked so creative. When we were static because they took the spaces away, now we're thinking about we want a creative player. Well, actually, we want more players who can carry, definitely. Who can commit people, commit people and move people. That's what we need. And Saka worked it out. And how he worked it out was really smart. He started in, went out, and then comes back into the space that he's left and in a lateral movement and creates movement that way. I think that player is so intelligent. His execution wasn't as crisp as he normally is. But what he did is he worked out. And Elliot, you're absolutely right. There were times when Saka and Aubameyang were in our first phase and we didn't play the ball forward. We would, if David Luiz plays, we smash this team. If Tierney plays, we smash it because they're more ambitious with that first phase pass. And they would have recognised the runs. But Saka, the way he unlocks teams, it does not belong in a 19-year-old's body. I don't know how he does this, but he manages to know how to carry it, the angle, and his weight of pass is just so good. He should have scored. He made a bad decision on the shot. But don't be disappointed about this game. This is what football is. Teams are going to watch us. We're one of the most formed teams in the country. They put up a plan against us. They compress the space. And you know what? The manager found a way to add some energy up top. And he's found a way to flip it around to stop them scoring on our right back area and basically nick the game in the last 5 minutes. It is a classic coaches get home, take the win bonus, have a drink. What a great day. So much to analyse that's not quite right. But while we're learning, we got 3 points. And I'll tell you what, I was very, very pleased with how this went.
Yeah, again, I mean, I hate to always compare and contrast to something like the Emery era, right? But like, you're always looking for the evolution. And I think under Emery, when we were bad, it wasn't just that we weren't getting shots. It's that we couldn't control games on the ball. We couldn't progress it. We couldn't move it quickly. I mean, if you watch the first little bit of this game where, all right, the first few minutes are dreadful. And then we had a period where we created a really good opportunity for Lacazette. He doesn't get the ball out of his feet. But like the ball was pinging. It was moving around. It just wasn't, we didn't have that final ball. And maybe part of it is that it wasn't coming to Saka enough. I mean, I thought Aubameyang was a little more peripheral in this game. The whole left-hand side seemed to short-circuit a little with Kolasinac.
And we couldn't find Willian, could we?
No, well, so I do want to get to that.
Available.
Well, all right. So Tim, let's talk about Willian and Lacazette's game. I mean, early on they were connecting. They were finding each other. They had a couple of good exchanges on in the right channel that Lacazette didn't get shots off, and then I thought Willian faded from the game a bit, and I'm not sure what was necessarily wrong. I think the thing with Willian is this is not a player who is extremely dynamic in my view. I just think he's intelligent. He moves it quickly. He goes where he's supposed to, but I don't think he's going to break a game open. And maybe it's just that, West Ham were just that little bit more organized and compact than Fulham, understandably. Fulham giving up another 4 goals against Leeds at the weekend. And Willian just didn't find the spaces to exploit, because I don't think he's going to do the spectacular. I think he's going to do the simple and available thing, which is a very valuable thing. We saw that a week ago. So between Lacazette and Willian, I thought there were 2 disappointing performances. Now look, Lacazette scores a goal, and you never want to write off a player who has scored a goal. But the time it takes for him to get the ball out of his feet in the box is a concern for me. And I think you saw with Nketiah just that little bit of extra sharpness. So do you want to maybe focus on those 2 as another one of our issues, breaking down West Ham? Because I thought a lack of dynamism from both of them was evident.
Yeah, and again, I think your assessment of Willian is right. Willian, I described him as like a rhythm section when I wrote about him last week. That's what he's always done. He played for Brazil with Neymar, played for Chelsea with Hazard. He's playing for Arsenal with Aubameyang. He's not the piece that the whole attack is built around, but he brings the kind of the structure, and he allows those players to shine while doing some really valuable things himself, like brilliant set pieces. He's good in kind of one-on-one situations, and he does have the intelligence to kind of come inside and tuck in. What I think happened in this game, and I think this probably impacted Lacazette as well, is that in the second half we just kind of gave up on our right-hand side, and Willian drifted over to the left a few times as well. Mm-hmm. So we put Xhaka right, kind of on the right side, which means in possession, he's going to look even more at that angle over the top, over towards the left, push Saka up, push Kolasinac more wide. So we had that kind of 3, sometimes 4 players overloading on that side, and we did nothing down the right. So I think you can include Bellerin and Nicola Pepe when he came on as well in this. Bellerin, not a lot from him in the second half because the ball just wasn't over there. Not a lot from Pepe when he came on because the ball just wasn't on that side. And with Lacazette's kind of signature move, I guess, in this system is that he comes with his back to goal towards the centre circle. And I forget which goal it was at the end of last season. Maybe it was the Aubameyang's first against Man City, where he just does that. Yeah. So you know what I'm going to say. He comes back towards the halfway line, spins on his right foot, and then just angles that kind of curled pass round to the right wing. And when there's nothing really going on your right wing, that kind of option's not there. So Lacazette basically, and I think correctly because of the other left-sided players we have, Lacazette kind of is more connecting with that right-hand side with Bellerin and Willian. And that just didn't happen in the second half. And I think that might be a mixture of how well West Ham shut that side down. But I also think maybe Arteta thought that Fredericks was more of a weakness than Cresswell. There was something about, or maybe he just felt he has stronger players on the left-hand side. Maybe it could have been that, but we were hitting that left a lot more in the second half. I probably should have looked up the data on that, but I certainly have a strong impression that we were going towards the left as well, and Willian kept going over there, and he must have been told, go over there. We're kind of almost abandoning right-hand side. So I do think that impacted the performances of both the players. I do think in the first half, Willian, like you said, he should have had another assist, really, if Lacazette pulls the trigger when he should in the second minute, and he plays a nice 1-2 with Willian. But we just didn't see enough of that kind of combination between the two. And I guess as well, West Ham played, they had their wing backs, but they played quite narrow. They were narrow in midfield. Their front 3 were narrow. They blocked those passing lanes up quite nicely. And I think maybe Willian just got a little bit lost in the game. But to be fair to him, Pepe didn't do an awful lot more when he came on either. So I think there were other things going on that impacted both players.
Yeah, and I mean, look, to be fair, if you give the ball to a player in a good position, he doesn't get a shot off, that's not on you. But like Willian had 31 touches leading to an XG chain of 0.0, meaning no touch he had in the game produced a move that at any point resulted in a shot. So in other words, like if I'm a central defender and I give it to you and you run the length of the pitch, give it to someone else and they shoot and score, or even just shoot, don't score, I get credited with some XG there for that chance from having been involved in the move. What this is telling you is basically Willian was not involved in any single move that resulted in any single shot. It's not really ideal. Now, I think there's some data that actually has that wrong, but I mean, it's close. It's one or none. But, you look at Lacazette, 11 touches within 25 yards of goal, one shot or shot creating action. Now, it's a goal, so you'll take it. Aubameyang, 9 touches in that same zone, 5 shots or shot creating actions. I thought this was a game where it's a tedious debate, so I don't want to lean into it, but I do think it was a debate. I do think it was a game where the Aubameyang center forward argument could have been stronger because we did progress the ball pretty well, and Lacazette did get the ball in some good situations where he wasn't able to get his shot off, and I just think Aubameyang's that little bit sharper with his movement and his shooting and like some of the early involvement with Willian. I don't know. I mean, Paul, I'll come back to you really quickly, though, because Clive's agreeing with me in the messages, and this never happens, so I want to leverage this moment and then record it and then have it played as a eulogy at my, hopefully, a long time from now, funeral. Clive, am I saying something that's right?
Yeah,
are we having a breakthrough?
I think Aubameyang had a bit of a lazy game. I don't think his movement was that great, and we need to be honest about that. I think he was finding it hard to read the service up to him. And I looked at this and I thought, this was a day for a bit of Willian on one side and Pepe on the other, and have 2 stretching options, one dropping in. I felt West Ham crowded Lacazette out completely, and I think this is a game where you can see the upgrade potential. I want my centre forward to be able to be strong enough not to be looked down on by Diop and Ogbonna. He's looked at Lacazette and just looked down on him. I want my centre forward to be able to take the ball to my feet and shake and bake and turn around and make people drop off and make them be scared they're going to turn around. Lacazette doesn't do that. He plays and goes backward, and they know he's going to set the play. So what they do is they squeeze off the setting angles, nick it, then turn around. So this was a day for activity and movement. Willian is very creative, but he can't be creative if no one's moving or no one can find him. He's just another player. It's as simple as that. So he goes hunting for the ball, goes inside, West Ham overload on our left-hand side, and Kola put crosses in. And that's not good. So we need a bit more shape. That's why Pepe came on, not just to give her that hole, to fill that hole and pin people back. And once we got that breadth and we covered that side, we could overload on the left with a bit more creativity and a bit more presence, and we end up getting a winning goal. So this is football, and I do think we have to look at Aubameyang and centre forward a little bit more. It's hard to pick the games, but at home, maybe we should think about it a bit more.
It's just crazy that he won't do it. This is why football is the worst game to analyze, and why you'd have to be crazy to do a football podcast, because I thought Aubameyang was mediocre. He had a brilliant assist. I thought Lacazette was poor, really poor. He scores the opening goal. Ceballos had a bad game. He sets up the winner. Like who would want to analyze football? Because I thought Lacazette and Ceballos were 2 of our poorer performers, and they win the game for us more or less. Now, granted, it's Saka who provides the service, and we should be purring over what we have in that player, especially on a day when he wasn't getting the service he deserves. And I do think that we will spend time really celebrating this win at the end of this podcast. Don't get me wrong. We're going to look at what these 3 points mean, and would we have gotten these 3 points in the past? But, Paul, I mean, part of this, too, is we've spent a lot of time talking about creating chances because, I mean, we had a lot of the ball, and we didn't create a lot of chances. We're outshot 14-7. But I want to focus on the defense. So I think Gabriel was given man of the match. I find it a little head-scratching, but so be it. The goal they score is, I think it's bad on a lot of people. I think Saka doesn't press early enough. I think Kola doesn't close down early enough. Those are the 2 big ones. Holding lets Antonio get in front of him, which he shouldn't. And I also think Gabriel is marking no one. I mean, he's running to the near post, and maybe you could say that's his job, is to run to the near post there, but there's nobody there, and I thought he could have cut it out. It's just not great defending all around. Gabriel did have some really good work keeping them out. One thing that I noticed, and I'm just going to bring this up again, I did mention on the Instant Reaction Pod, if you want to watch this game again and have a laugh, watch every time Gabriel had to go up for a header. It was the craziest thing. There's the handball one that could have been a penalty, but shouldn't have been, where he just misses it. There's another one where he's stooping right on the edge of the 6-yard box, right in front of the goal, and he's stooping and he's like a foot below it. There's another one where he jumps with someone small, I'm not even sure it was, like a midfielder, and he mistimes his jump completely and it goes right over him to the midfielder. Like, for a big dude, he had a bad day in the air trying to head the ball, which is weird. But I'm curious how you thought of the performance of the defense. And I'll admit that maybe Leno didn't have the commanding performance in the box to settle down the defense. He gave them plenty to do with spilled balls and maybe punches that could have been better. But I mean, overall, a tolerable day from the central defense. Is that the best way to categorize it?
I think there were some dodgy moments, and the goal, I definitely mention. We gave the crosser way too much space to get he was basically uncontested. Just no matter what way you want to look at it, giving a guy a free run and a free shot at putting in a cross, just all wrong. So take your choice. Take him down early, pressure him, go in for the challenge. But fucking hell, just letting a guy run the length of the pitch and put in a cross is bad. And then Holding, I think, actually has a pretty good position on Antonio, but Antonio accelerates and Holding doesn't anticipate it, and he needs to be going to get in ahead of that guy. Those are the two big ones for me. I know what you mean on Gabriel, because I'm kind of looking at his position, but I think it's pretty marginal. He could have gambled a little bit and gone a little deeper to cut off that ball, but his positioning is not terrible. I think overall Gabriel's pretty good. I know what you mean on the headers, but I think generally he's pretty good on headers. From my vast research of him, which I think accumulated about 135 minutes, and I guess we saw the Fulham game where he had to do some of that heading stuff, and he was very good. But yeah, he was. It was not his best heading day. I think overall he was pretty good. I thought they really went after Holding, and on review of it, I think Holding generally did pretty good, and I think we all saw him and Antonio having a bit of laugh, and I think that's because Holding actually thought he was mostly holding his own with him, and I think he was, but I think they went after that side just because they wanted to go wide, and that was the side that suited Antonio, as opposed to they were having great joy against Holding. I think they were just having great joy down that wing. I mean, ironically, it's Bellerin who chases the ball into the box before the end of the first half, and we're caught way upfield with everybody but the centre backs back, and I think Holding was often kind of exposed for whatever reasons on that side. It didn't seem like he had a huge amount of cover from Bellerin, so Bellerin was getting forward quite a lot, even if we weren't producing that much on that side. I don't know. I thought the defensively we were in all sorts of trouble quite often, especially that 20 minutes in the second half when they came at us and we were still fairly sterile in our play. I think Kolasinac was an issue, but I think defensively it was a bit ragged. It was players who hadn't played together. You had there was the cross that Saka ended up having to defend on his own because all three centre backs were on the front post, and it was just it was a bit off, and everything was a little off. I thought Gabriel was okay, Holding was okay for the most part. Leno kind of reminded you why Emmy's strengths on claiming the ball and dominating his area was something that I think teams develop a level of confidence around their 6-yard box with that starts to apply to other areas of the game, but he was good otherwise. So second game of the season, ropey, change of players. a shock change to the back lineup after you've been practicing all week long. But yeah, we were pretty ragged, especially over on our left side, ironically, even if they were coming down our right side.
Yeah, it doesn't help narratively that Emi Martinez has saved a penalty on his debut. I mean, it just you feel for Leno, because the amount of good he would have to be for people to stop talking about Emi Martinez is not really a reachable level. I mean, I don't think you would say that the problem with this game is Leno per se. I mean, again, I fully acknowledge that Leno did not have a classic game commanding his area, but like, he's just never going to be able to get out of the shadow of Emi Martinez because A, he's very large, and B, he played at a level that over a short period of time, I don't think you can exceed it. So,
France is always Emier now.
Yeah, and to be fair, maybe that's why we signed Runar, because it's very easy to get out of his shadow. That's both a size joke and a quality joke. And I'm kidding. Look, backup keeper, no big deal. It's a refrigerator. Don't worry about it. Tim, I think, it still looks like Arteta, if there's an area where he's learning and he's trying to figure it out and he's, not totally confident yet, it's how he wants to change it when he makes subs. It still feels like his primary move is like for like. It's Pepe for Willian, it's Nketiah for Lacazette, that he doesn't necessarily want to change the shape. It worked out in this game, so I'm not criticizing him. Just, do you think that he could show a little more flexibility with substitutions in terms of the timing, but also maybe a willingness to try a different shape? Or are you more inclined to say, hey, look, it worked, we won, he got players on the pitch, one of whom made the difference in Nketiah? Like, how do you view his use of substitutions and sort of a rigidity to some extent in terms of sticking with the system?
I think this is one to stick a pin in and keep an eye on. I would say that the shape did slightly change at the beginning of the second half, albeit just not through a substitution. So we swapped Saka and Ceballos. I think we kind of weren't really playing a 3-4-3 quite as much. I think it was much closer to a 4-3-3 in the second half. Yes, all the changes were pretty much like for like, and the third change that was going to be made was going to be El Neni for Ceballos, but which is, I mean, in a sense, like for like. But I think what that tells you as well, and where there's probably mitigation for Arteta here, is he doesn't have a lot to play with in terms of changing shape and changing games. So the signing of Willian gives him a bit more, because it gives him Pepe as a bench option. And Nketiah as well, but there's only one thing you can do with Nketiah. Really, he can't, and this isn't criticism of him at all, but he's a number 9. You put him up front. So yes, maybe you could have put him up front with Lacazette and Aubameyang. I think that's something we have done before when chasing games, but I wonder if Arteta. It's interesting because Arteta does talk about becoming tactically more flexible, and I think he means that more subtly than maybe we think. But if he is from, as it looks, the kind of the Pep, Bielsa / Cruyff school, as much as it looks like, the whole premise there is, don't do plan B, just keep doing plan A, keep having faith in plan A, do plan A to death, do plan A so much that it back to front, do plan A until like it's a cult and that you go to bed at night bowing before a big letter A. The whole thing is.
I don't think I have a choice about the pod title now anymore. I had a couple in mind, but I don't think I have a choice anymore.
But it's kind of repetition of patterns and things like that, and to be fair, Wenger never used to change the formation really. He'd put any old fucker at right back. That was like. But I mean, I think Wenger got it with attacking substitutions. There isn't really much of a sophistication to it. It's just, okay, I'm going to take off my defensive midfielder and replace him with a centre forward, and I'm going to take off the least enterprising of our two wingers and replace him with a centre forward. So I'll have like Kanu and Wiltord on the left and right wing, which is ridiculous. But what they will do is just get in the area and just pin this team back. And his substitutions were not sophisticated at all, and they didn't really do anything to change the formation. He didn't used to suddenly go to 3 or 4 up front. He would just put strikers on, but in the same areas of the pitch where he already had midfielders, because he'd trust their instincts. And I think it's I guess it's a line you walk, isn't it, between making a decisive change but not completely ruining kind of the balance of your, or the equilibrium of your team, by confusing them and just like, asking them to play 3 different formations in a game. So I think it's one to stick a pin in, particularly maybe as his options get better. One thing that is interesting, I think, was that Joe Willock wasn't going to be on the bench for this. And even, he came onto the bench when Tierney pulled out. And even with him on the bench, El Neni was Arteta's next option. That to me, like I think El Neni's going to stay this season. I don't think he'll be a starter, but I think he'll come into the rotation. I believe Arteta when he praised his performance against Fulham. And so I think that's something to keep an eye on. But the substitutions thing, yes, maybe, but I do think there's a tricky balance there. And that Arteta's probably being influenced by, a number of factors, particularly in the kind of early generation of this team.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, look, the thing that's interesting about Arteta's system is that it's several different systems in one, right? Because it's not just a back 3 where the wing backs flood up. Like in possession, it can be a 4-2-2-2, and it can do all kinds of different things. So sometimes the tweaks aren't about who you bring on; it's about where you position the players within that system. And so we need to expand our minds a little bit about how you change a system, because it doesn't have to be by bringing on different players. What Arteta has shown us, it can be about by deploying the players you're using in a different way. Let's talk a little bit about the subs, though. I mean, Clive, the Pepe thing is an interesting conversation. And, we did an instant reaction pod after Fulham where we did the natural thing after a 3-0 win, which is complained about Pepe for 45 minutes. So that's why everybody loved that pod. But, I mean, it is a conversation that is, I don't understand how you can get away from it, because we have a lot invested in him. His price tag is not all he is. He is a player, and his qualities are what matters, not his price tag at this point. But given what we spent to get him, and we know that some of that might have been transfer chicanery, the fact is we have a lot invested in that move working. He's a player we obviously felt could be a big player for us, and I still think he can. I think he is tremendously talented. I don't know that I think he works as a substitute. I think much like Alexis, he's going to try a lot of things and they don't all come off, and players like that are streaky and they go through moments where it's working for them and moments where it isn't. I think he needs more time for that to happen. I also don't think it helped that he came on at a time when we were very left side biased in the way we were building play and the way we wanted to attack. So given that it was a quiet game for Willian, and I think even potentially a poor game for Willian, where do you think Pepe stands right now? I think the front 3 pecking order is a really interesting one, because we have a lot of options up there. It is a little bit unclear to me what the plan is, and it doesn't have to be a set plan. What do you think?
Yeah, we have a lot of games. Right? We do have a lot of games, and we got a lot of big games as well coming up. So I'm never worried about these things. I think a week or so ago when Willian had a 9 out of 10 game, we're thinking, crikey, what's going to happen here? In this game, I actually think he would have suited Pepe much more. I think he would have fixed their fullbacks more. I think he would have stayed wider longer. And they had a double fullback thing. They did what we do with Crespo and Masuaku, and they pushed us back and they ran into those areas. And if Pepe was there, one of them would have stayed back because they have to, because he's got the speed to run beyond. And it just, sometimes a game suits you and sometimes a game doesn't, and it's just the way it goes. I don't worry about Pepe. I think he's not quite as sharp as Net, and I don't think, like for example, Ceballos was. I don't think he was anywhere near fit. But he got his minutes and he ended up setting up the winning goal. It's a great day for him. That's not the Ceballos we saw after lockdown. He was nowhere near as fit as a shot.
No, I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, and he was just dragging his legs again like he did in January, right? So it's going to take time for these players to get up to speed. Not all of them come back like Aubameyang does, looking exactly the same, if not better, right? So some of them are just not there. And that's why, for example, Holding is looking fitter. He's looking better than he's done. He's in good shape. And the manager said, I can't afford to lose you. I've got centre-backs going out the door. I've got Murray not there yet. I've got 2 young guys coming in, and first time they've even been to the stadium, and we're judging them. If they jump under Gabriel jumps under a ball, that's the first time he's come up against Mikel Antonio. And once he boshed him in the second half, Antonio went over to Holding's side, because that's where he saw the fun, because Bellerin was... his currency of success was, how can I get up the pitch? And he wants to go front-footed, which worked beautifully at Fulham, where we had good possession. When we had dodgy possession against West Ham, because they were much sharper in the challenge, suddenly he's out of his hole. And suddenly they're putting crosses in and Holding's playing right back. Every game has a different story, and we just have to accept it. I think Tim's points about, what we do off the subs bench, I think what we're going to see from now on, and I've said this before, is we're going to see more players that can do more things, more hybrid players, and we need to have a centre forward that can post and go long. We need to have the ability to switch with Aubameyang so he can go centre forward and we don't lose a pace out wide. We need to have a midfielder that can carry or so and can pass as well, so can play the horseshoe game but can also step for the lines. These things will come. And the shape will change in game because we've got people like Saka and Maitland-Niles that can do both. They're now two-way players. So I just think he's building his squad, and these games are ones you really, really learn from. And as fans, we have to be comfortable to know that not every game is going to be like Fulham away. What does that actually mean? So for me, players at different levels of fitness. Pepe, I'm still behind. I'm still confident. And he will have his period in the season where he's really, really good, as did Willian last week, for example. We just got to accept it.
The thing I will say is I think Pepe really shined against some of the really tough teams we played towards the end of Project Restart and in the Cup. So, Paul, it leads me to wonder, is it possible that that's sort of how Arteta sees it, that Willian keeps the ball ticking over, he moves it quickly, he doesn't slow it down, he's not as individualistic, which lets the sort of system work against what you might consider weaker opposition. I think we sometimes go too far in calling things weaker opposition, because I think in the Premier League, as we're seeing, there's not a lot of weak. Brighton really pushed Chelsea, and Palace beat United, and these things hilariously, by the way, and Everton beat Spurs hilariously. The less said about what they did after that, the better. But is it possible that Pepe would be in line to start some of these big games we have coming up, like Liverpool, for example, at the weekend, because he was quite good in those games, and his individualistic skill might show itself more in games where we will be less on the ball and less in possession.
Yeah, and for all the talk about why do we make him play from deep and have to work his way up the pitch, he's one of the best players to take the ball up the pitch. He gave Van Dijk conniptions the first time we played them at Anfield. So I think Clive's point is very sage, which is we got a lot of games coming up. And I think we're going to see a lot of Willian and Pepe. And it's there for Pepe to, his ceiling should be the highest, basically the highest in the team alongside Aubameyang if he can ever achieve his full potential. So he's going to get a run of games here, whether it's coming on for 30 minutes because we need a goal or 40 minutes at the end of a game, and then maybe starting the next game when he's proved something. I definitely rate him as a counter-attacking option when we're seeing less of the ball in these tougher games. I think he's about to get a lot of minutes. So I hope he's up for it. And we saw towards the end of last season, he was up for it going both ways and seemed to have developed an enjoyment of the defensive side of the game too, teaming well with Bellerin on a number of occasions, where the two of them were holding their corner and putting in tackles and playing their way out. And what's key is now that we have a more athletic Bellerin, maybe to our cost a little bit in this game, given he was going forward maybe a little bit more than seemed wise at times, but maybe he's now ready to do that overlapping thing that gets Pepe cutting inside, inverting, getting onto his attacking foot, while Bellerin goes up, bombs up the wing. Because what we didn't see in this game that was most frustrating was anybody working the corners. If you think of the Firmino created chance in the Liverpool game this weekend, the one he floats in with some triangles with Salah, who then cuts infield, and Firmino floats in the ball kind of like Aubameyang did for us into Mane. It's great work in the corners, And we didn't really do that in this game. And what I would have expected more of that with Willian and Bellerin working those corners and getting Willian in behind. And yet somehow we didn't manage to do that. We didn't manage to play up that right wing. But that's the opportunity with Pepe and Bellerin. If Bellerin will bomb on and Pepe cuts in, they can create all sorts of patterns. The frustrating thing maybe is that Lacazette isn't as resourceful over in those corners, connecting with Willian and Bellerin yet, as Firmino can with Salah and Mane. I mean, they just such clever interplay with the three of them. Lacazette does a lot of good work, but I don't see that cleverness in the triangles and connections in the channels. So to me, that's the opportunity for Pepe and Bellerin to start creating those connections, and hopefully they can link up with Lacazette and do some stuff up in that corner. But yeah, Pepe's time is coming.
Yeah. Look, I think that we said it on the Instant Reaction Pod, and we've gone big on the Pepe discussion. I think that we are a little scarred as Arsenal fans. We are not used to having more than one good player for a position, which means that sometimes the player you like won't start. I do think it is also fair to say a player that you invest massively in is one that you expect to have a big role, but we'll see. And Paul, I think you hit the nail on the head in a lot of things there. And one thing that I want to do, though, Tim, is I want to make sure that we also emphasize that, like, the expectation that we're going to be a swashbuckling, excellent team on our way to winning every game is silly. We were bad last season. We finished 8th. Even under Arteta, the underlying metrics showed that there was a lot of work still to be done. Arteta himself said they had the best week of training this week that he'd seen, that he was proud of the way they fought, but that they played bad, basically. I mean, that's a summary, but that's basically what he said, and I don't think he's totally wrong. But I think we are all too often inclined to make it our fault when it doesn't go well and never say that the other team was a part of the game. Antonio was a handful, and I thought he played well, and I thought he put himself about, as they say, and challenged us in the air. And I thought that they had a plan to shut down our access to central spaces, which we aren't particularly excellent at doing. I think we had one hand tied behind our back with Kolasinac, and they understood where to funnel the ball to short circuit our attack. I mean, they did some things well, and they quickly countered on us, which is something that, I think we can be vulnerable to, because let's face it, last season we didn't have a lot of possession. Even in the games we won, even against Fulham, we weren't dominant on the ball. We did a lot in transition. A lot of our goals in Project Restart came from back to front moves, playing out from the back under pressure, beating the pressure, creating transition opportunities. We didn't do a lot of pushing teams back. And in this game, we had 64% possession. And I think West Ham actually used that to their advantage. Taking a team like Arsenal that hasn't really had a lot of experience playing with the ball a lot and transitioning us effectively. Look, there was one period of this game, Tim. It was a 10, 12-minute period. We talked about this, 22-minute period. It's a bit longer. Talked about this in the Instant Reaction Pod, where they outshot us 10-0. It was like the 52nd minute to the 74th minute, around then. That was a dreadful period of the game where we looked, to me, as bad as we have looked, under any coach at any point in time. Other than that, all things being equal, thought we held our own and we've covered the weaknesses. So for you, are you taking more positives than negatives out of this? Are you inclined to say this is a game we don't win last season, which is a lot of talking point people are saying. And the reason I think this is complicated, Tim, when Emery arrived, we were all so eager to see the positives. Understandably, you want to be happy. You're a football fan. You want to support your club and love what you're seeing. And so even during that long winning run, when the underlying metrics told us very clearly things weren't working, we were trying to pick out some positives. Do you want to contrast this for me and just sort of say why you might see more positives in this and pick out positives in this? When obviously it's certainly not a vintage performance by any stretch of the imagination.
My personal kind of angle would be I'm going to wait and see. More data needed.
Not very takey.
because like one way you can look at it, right? We drew 14 games last season, and here's a late winner in a game where we kind of struggled, and you can say, okay, signs of progress. You can also say that this was very, very similar to the last time we played West Ham at home, and where we kind of scrapped a 1-0 we didn't really deserve with a late goal. So in that respect, you could say, well, what's changed? And by the way, it was a substitute. We brought Lacazette off the bench that day, and he scored the winner. So in one respect, it's exactly the same. So I think it's one of those things where we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to wait and see whether, I think we'll have a few more games like this, and we're going to have to wait and see how they go, because this might be a bit of a kind of, this might be a bit of a one-off. It might be just a game where we got lucky, or it might become a theme. Arteta talked about teams that don't work hard don't get lucky. And so he was trying to kind of say, yeah, maybe this wasn't vintage, but we kind of stuck at it. And he said he saw the belief increase in the last 15 minutes. And I kind of get that, because the thing that struck me with about 15 minutes to go was, I guess because I wasn't feeling great about the performance, I thought, why have West Ham dropped off? Like, West Ham looked the most likely to score. Why have they stopped attacking us? And I guess the thing I didn't consider was that we stopped them. We did something to make them back off, which maybe I didn't appreciate at the time. So I would temper it and say, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens the next time this happens. Was it just down to variance, or does this become a bit more of a theme? But I liked Arteta's comments afterwards about Arsenal kind of needing a game like this and taking some lessons from it, and of course taking some lessons and getting the 3 points is kind of exactly what you want. I still think that we have an issue with this type of game, and I don't think it's going away until, as much as I hate the way that all football analysis is now absolutely around the transfer market. And Michael Cox did a great tweet about this with Man U Palace, saying, like, how many Palace players would get in the Man U team? 2 tops, and yet all the analysis afterwards is about Man United not buying players. But I really do think that that's kind of the case with Arsenal, unless, like we said, going back to my point at the beginning of the pod, we're a bit braver and perhaps play Saka in that third midfield spot. But I would take positives from it with things like, Saka making the difference there, Ceballos being brave enough to spot that run and break away from the midfield structure, and to Nketiah, the substitute, kind of getting in there and making a difference. So, maybe cautiously optimistic, but to be honest, I wouldn't use this game and say, like, I think it would be confirmation bias on my part if I used this game and said, yep, see, this is because Arteta's steering us exactly in the right direction. Even if I do think that underneath, if I was looking at this scientifically, I'd say this game is not sufficient data to say that this game could have been a one-off. We could have just got lucky. So when we inevitably have this problem again, in a few weeks' time, I'd probably take a more rounded view of it then.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you got to be really careful in terms of being willing to see the positives, being willing to get on the boat, to go with the process, and also avoiding like sheer hypocrisy, right? Because if we were going to point out that a lot of those wins under Emery during that unbeaten run and were bad, that the underlying metrics were bad, that the football was bad, I don't think we can have a win that's kind of not great by underlying metrics where we don't look great under Arteta and say, no, but this one's good. But I can't help myself. I see a difference. I see a coherence to the plan. I see a structure that makes sense. And I think that structure eventually saw us win a game where maybe the shot balance didn't favor us, but the dominance in possession and territory did. And that's something that at the worst points before Arteta, we didn't even have that. It's a really small needle to thread, I admit, intellectually. And Clive, I kind of want to finish with you then on that, which is the other team plays a role. West Ham were good. We beat them.
Yep.
We didn't do everything perfectly. I don't think by any means we were terrible. We had a terrible period in the match, but like our failures were more failures to find the final ball than they were failures to play football, at a professional level, which at times was the case over the last few seasons. It's also the case that like we haven't really added anyone. We added Willian. And Gabriel, who admittedly was man of the match, so maybe I should shut my mouth. But what I mean is the team is still largely what it was when it finished 8th, and we're getting results, and we needed 2 wins from the first 2 games with basically no preseason, and we got them. That was the job done. Now the tough run comes up, and we see where we go from there. I think Arteta was great in saying, we're not even talking about the title. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to grow and get better. So are you able to thread that needle intellectually, seeing the positives, seeing this win as what it was? Look, we can't be so analytical that we can't celebrate and punch the air and be thrilled at a late winner. I was going nuts when we scored that goal. I was so happy. So, like, are you able to just set aside the analysis for a minute and say, I loved this. I love a late winner. You know, doesn't matter if it was a little jammy, but like we won and we're onward and upward.
Yeah, we draw this game 2-2 last year, don't we? Simple as that. And if
or 1-1,
lose
we
it
just
2-1,
never get the second. Yeah.
And I felt we solved problems. Exactly what I want to see. I want to see us solve problems. I want to see us block off sides. You know, Tim sort of said there West Ham dropped off. Well, they dropped off because we brought on a 19, 20-year-old speedster down centre forward that doesn't want to post up. He wants to run in behind. And we brought on a right winger that wants to run in behind straight away. And suddenly that makes them think, well, we can't press up on Willian and Lacazette, and all we got to do is watch Aubameyang, and the service on that side's being blocked off. So they have to drop off. They start looking at the scoreboard. They drop away. We start to get possession higher at the pitch. Little slide ball, goal. Great, absolutely wonderful day. We get through the bad bits. We see it out. We were a bit thick before half time with Bellerin running to centre forward and Holding not able to commit on his man and block off because his wide back was behind him. Cause and effect, we didn't need to do that with 1 minute to go at half time. We get a little slap there. West Ham come out after half time with a bit of confidence and we take a bit of time to fix it. And then we fix it without conceding and then we end up winning the game. This is fine. This is absolutely fine. If we lose, it's a slightly different story. You know, Gabriel gets through a difficult period from when he's jumping under the ball, ends up being dominant. You know, it's good. Tobias gets minutes in his legs. Saka does his thing, develops into the game. Saka goes through the first maybe dodgy patch he's had at home, comes out, part of the pre-assist on both the goals. This is good. Bellerin's finding his legs. Willian discovered that actually the way I play this game's not going to work. This is all good. We're finding stuff out. And when we're finding stuff out, we're winning. And we don't look like losing. You know, and it's been a while. You know, it's been a while. We got to, enjoy this. It's a journey we're on. It's going to be tough. There's more work to do in the transfer market, which we all know, which is going to give us more options. But while we're learning, we're winning. We have a stable base. We're adding solidity to that base. You know, Kolasinac, Holding, Gabriel. If you look at that back three, you would not even predict that 4 months ago, right? And so we're learning, developing, and I'm happy to see this. I really am, and I'm not concerned about the future at all. I'm just looking forward to adding more players with more layers to allow us to fix more problems like I did in this game in a more seamless way, and it's going to be fun.
I'll level with you. If Tim hadn't gone so big on the Plan A thing, which I now have to use as the pod title, and I don't really have a choice. More players with more layers. It's got a ring to it, doesn't it? But I already committed to the Plan A thing for Tim, so I apologize. Look, I mean, it is also the case that, we're not getting cut apart routinely. We're not looking like clown shoes at the back. I think there's a tendency when you're Arsenal to evaluate whether the team is good or bad almost entirely on how well we're attacking. But, I do think we look like grown-ups defensively, and I know they had some chances here, and, one of their biggest chances of the game I think should be discounted a little because it's the goalkeeper spilling the ball right on, 3 yards off his goal line, so that makes it look like a huge chance, but it's not from them breaking us down. They have a goal that's sort of a tap-in that's also their huge XG, and other than that, it's not a lot that they're creating. So I think there are positives here, and look, it's 6 points from 6 to start the season when we knew after these 2 games, it gets tough. So, Tim, I'll finish with you on just a super quick point. We've got Leicester in the League Cup. We don't have the biggest squad. We don't have the best squad. And I think we don't have the luxury of saying, screw the Europa League. That is a clear path into the Champions League for us when the league is going to be really tricky, given the amount of talent that's been added in the clubs we're competing with. So, the FA Cup, we just won it. Sure, we should go for it again, but I mean, that's a topic for January. If there's one competition that, to me, you can just throw away, it's the League Cup. I know there are fans, and I think you're one of them, who sort of falls in the category of, if Arsenal have a fixture, it's important and we don't throw it away. I tend to be more from the you have to prioritize camp, and I think given the talent we have, I don't see how we can prioritize the League Cup. Leicester is a good squad, so if we really want to win this game, there's a tendency to have to go stronger, and then it's right back to Liverpool in our next game, and then the games start showing up twice a week, and they get pretty hard. So Are you willing to let this one go and play the kids, or would you rotate in some of the first team players that maybe haven't been as involved, like a Pepe? How can we at least get Aubameyang a day off?
Yeah. So with the League Cup, I pretty much always support what we do, which is largely playing the second string, which is exactly what I'd do this time. Which I'd do anyway, but in this particular season, where we've got 5 weeks fewer, and the powers that be have decided we're going to play just as much football, which is crazy, and really the Carabao Cup shouldn't be happening this season. I understand why it is, because it's still a revenue generator for particularly clubs lower down the pyramid, so I do understand that. But in the normal run of things, if that wasn't a consideration, everyone would just say, it probably should go anyway as a competition. But I'd just play the second string. So I'd play all the guys that were. I would play Pepe. No problem with playing Pepe here. Similarly, I wouldn't cry any tears if he wasn't. But I'd be starting Nketiah, Reece Nelson, El Neni. If David Luiz needs some minutes, no problem there. Saliba, I think he'll play. I would absolutely play the second string. I will not cry any tears if we go out of this for the reasons that you suggest. I think sometimes with the cups as well, you play the hand you're given. And we've been given Leicester away, and if we win that, we get Liverpool away. And I think sometimes you just think, do you know what? Probably not this year. But then again, if we take them both out, then perhaps that makes the pool a bit weaker. But look, Man City always go for this, don't they? The Carabao Cup, and that has kind of meant that they monopolise it in recent years. I'd play the second string. I'm not enormously invested in this result. I will not lose any sleep if we lose. So yeah, absolutely, let's give Aubameyang the day off. Xhaka stay at home, Ceballos stay at home. Not least because there's a pandemic as well. And Leicester's a bit of a hotspot for that at the moment. So, let's just give those guys a day off. They can sit at home and pay £10 for their match day pass on Carabao.com, and we go from there, and we can get some minutes into some guys who might need some minutes at the moment, and might push a case for inclusion. Let's see El Neni again. Arteta likes him, like what he saw against Fulham. Let's see if let's see how much of a part of this he can be. Let's see if Pepe absolutely tears it up and scores a hat-trick and rips Leicester to shreds, and then he's got a selection dilemma for Liverpool away. Let's see some of that. Let's see Nketiah again. Let's see if he gets on the score sheet, perhaps pushes his case for some starts. I think that's all fine. And I think that's what we should use this competition for, and what we pretty much always have used it for. Yeah,
I could live with that. Absolutely. And I think, there are players betting in who can be used, like William Saliba is the first one that jumps into my mind, obviously. I think Clive
made me laugh.
Feeding me news. I think the Pepe one is interesting because you give him a game to maybe catch a little bit of fire. That could be great. By the similar token, like, does that mean that he doesn't start against Liverpool? Where I think he can be devastating against them. Joe Willock would be another player I think could be in line for a start. Again, another one that just popped into my head. Clive, you want to type anything else I can say? I'm like I'm like Ron Burgundy. Whatever you type into the chat, I just say it. I'm Ron Burgundy. Let's leave it there. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, pause. Woo-hoo. Tim's on Twitter. Stroberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review, and then write in the review all the reasons why the stuff I said was stupid. And maybe what we need to do from now on is start putting the title of the podcast to a vote, because there's so many good possibilities. But Tim gets it today. So anyway, we've got Leicester midweek, and then it's Liverpool. Is it Monday for Liverpool? I hate when we don't play on the weekend. But you look at it, and we start the season 3 points up on Chelsea, 6 points up on United. Granted, they have a game in hand, but that's just what you want. Get out in front of them and make them chase you, and hope their legs fall off. So we'll see how it goes. Leicester coming up. We'll have Scott's Analytics pod for patrons this week. One or two other new things, and of course a post-match pod after the League Cup, because God knows that's going to be a barn burner. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Leicester 0.